I'd like to test this from another angle. Many schools struggle to motivate kids to work hard, to study hard, especially kids who come from families that didn't encourage studying and learning. So some economists have proposed that schools offer cash incentives to motivate academic achievement, cash rewards for good grades or for high scores on standardized tests. They've tried this in New York, in Chicago, and Washington, $50 for an A, $35 for a B. In Dallas, Texas, they have a program that pays second graders $2 for each book they read. Now, let's suppose that you were the superintendent of schools at a big school district, and this proposal came to you to pay the kids, let's say, to read books or to get good grades. How many of you would be in favor, and how many would be against? How many would reject this out of hand?
You should want to do well in school. This is something you should strive for, regardless of whether or not you receive financial rewards for every book you read or every A you receive.
Josh?
My hesitation is if we were to take that away suddenly, whether or not they would have continued to learn without the monetary incentive afterwards. If people could recognize that, sometimes learning is fun, even though there's work involved with it, then that could be a worthy investment because it wouldn't have to continue.
Getting them to think that reading could be an enjoyable way to spend your time. Even if the books were very short, that might be encouraging them to read long books, right? They get to like books.
Suppose the impact was to teach kids that reading is a chore to be done for pay.
It depends on whether they enjoy the books. If they enjoy the book, they will become encouraged to read without compensation. If they don't enjoy it, then nothing's going to do anything for them.
My preference, obviously, would be to see a world where people didn't need to get paid for things that we think that they would want to be motivated to do anyway. And I think the question is really about living standards and ultimately economic progress, because obviously there are societies where we wouldn't be able to generate the funds to encourage people to go to school, etc.
Because it's too expensive?
It's too expensive.
But is there any other objection?
In the context of a capitalist money world and in a world where people feel that their freedoms need to be preserved, I think that for societal good, I can see why using incentives might be appealing.
Do you worry that paying kids to read will get them to read for the wrong reason, will crowd out the intrinsic love of reading?
There's reading and there's reading. There might be people who game traversing through books to get cash, which isn't really reading. Just spelling a word. I have a 4-year-old right now. What's that word, Daddy? What does that mean? When that comes out and it's part of our connection, I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting work that's done about the difference between learning from a person when you're young and learning from an iPad. They showed the children working with the person. Then they break, come back, take a test, and they retain everything. The next group of children, they show them with the iPad, getting the same lecture. They take a break, come back, and they retain nothing. So I think there's something about the heart connection that matters to learning. I don't think you can do that with price signals.
It's very easy to say people should love learning when you're from a family with, people that, encouraged you and you've gone to a good school and so on. But so many people throughout the world haven't had the support and they don't see learning in that way. For me, whilst it sort of cheapens learning somewhat, the actual utility and the overall outcome created by incentivizing children in this way is positive overall.
So it cheapens learning by substituting a lower motivation.
Potentially, yeah.
So it might be worth it if it really does increase academic performance by kids from poor backgrounds.
I actually think as soon as we compensate someone for reading a book, it's directly telling them that this is a labor that you must go through to be compensated. And even though I do think it would be successful, as soon as it stopped, I think the lack of intrinsic motivation would, in the long term, harm all the students.
So you think money corrupts learning by teaching the wrong lessons about the reason to study or to read.
Yes.
And it substitutes a lower motivation for the higher one.
Not just lower, but unsustainable.
Matthew?
So your argument is that money is a signal that this is a cost that you have to incur to receive this benefit of $2. But at the same time, isn't it a signal that society says, this is such a good thing, we want to give you this money? It's a signal both ways. It's a positive signal or a negative signal, depending on how you interpret it.
I agree with you that may corrupt their curiosity and push them to cheat in exams just to get the A. I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that we have to add another reward system that will over-corrupt their education and their learning.
The reward system is already in place, though. Like, if you think about where most of the people end up after college, it's usually like in the financial sector. And I'm pretty sure that half of the people that go there, they're not necessarily thinking, oh, I have to learn because I'm really interested in this, but I'm learning just because I want to have a huge salary and work for firms A, B, and C.
I agree. This already happens. And what I'm saying is innovation comes from curiosity and from the love of learning, and society already corrupted education.
But I thought you were going to say some kids study hard because they want to get high-paying jobs on Wall Street. But I thought you were going to say, and that's equally corrupt.
I believe so.
What do you say to that?
I would say that I personally wouldn't do it for the same reasons, but I have nothing against. I understand that the utility you derive from this is like small than the one you derive from intellectual curiosity, but again, I would not use it as a basis
What's
of
the
any
purpose
law.
of learning?
And in addition to that, I would use monetary incentive in school. I think the social welfare could be improved at the end.
Why should we learn? To create labor or to what?
Why do I think that learning should happen?
Yeah.
Like for a billion reasons.
To create people who work on Wall Street or for
No, I don't
reason?
think that this should be like the first and primary purpose of like education, obviously.
Do you agree innovation could be, to create more stuff and make things
No, I don't
more...
even think that it should be like necessarily innovation. I think it should be just to create like responsible citizens who can make like rational decisions.
Do you
and
think
be
paying people to
valuable in
learn
a way
will make
to
them
society.
responsible citizens?
The fact that you add a monetary incentive to this doesn't automatically imply that you're not creating that same person.
Do you think paying people to learn that will make them responsible citizens?
I'm not sure what the effect will be. I don't think you know either.
Then how do you support monetary incentives if you're not sure about the effect?
Just because obviously the current system is failing in some respects.
So we make it fail more?
No, we are not sure if it's going to fail or not. We can try it. And if we just abstract ourselves from this situation, like social psychology shows that this completely fails. Like monetary incentives don't work.
Exactly. Then why are you supporting them?
Here the question is completely different. It's just what's the morality behind this? And I don't see any like specific problem.
But isn't part of the moral calculus whether or not it works?
Oh, well,
No,
we've said that. We've said that. We would try. There's possibly a problem in the long term, but it may think this is wonderful and the money may become irrelevant.
No, they
So
will
we
not
just
learn to
don't
learn.
know.
They will learn to get it done.
What if, after we took away the incentive, they still valued the learning? What if it was just a temporal thing? You can pay up to like 2nd to 4th grade or something and get people literate, and then realize, oh, I like to read.
And then they got hooked for the love of it.
Yeah,
They got
for the
hooked
love
on
of it.
reading.
I think starting out from a position of I'm paying you to do this, you tell a kid, well, you have to sit here and do this. But don't worry, like if you do a good job, you'll get a reward. It's the same thing of paying your kids to clean the dishes, like do things that they should be doing anyway.
You are doing it in a way. Like if you tell your kid, unless you do your homework or you can get an A on this test, I'm not going to give you money to go out with your friends this weekend, is the exact same situation.
I was really on the fence about this, but where I've been in favor of markets in our previous discussions have been between two consenting adults making rational decisions. In this case, though, I have to agree with you guys because I believe that when you take it down to 2nd graders, I don't believe that they have the agency to make these transactions, which is why I do believe that exactly what you're saying, that it corrupts curiosity.
Erica.
With this kind of program, we're putting in place an extrinsic motivation that has the potential to remove any sort of intrinsic motivation for learning, and a program that will also stop after these kids stop being in school, and this could cause problems in the future. And I see this also as being the difference between someone working hard, let's say in college, for the love of learning or to get a good job. That motivation is extrinsic, but it is also not temporary. It will always be the case.